On the edge of the Andromeda Reach, where stars flickered like dying embers and the sky burned violet at dusk, there stood a ruined city known as Varnies 7. Once a thriving hub of interstellar trade, it now lay broken beneath a cracked dome, its skeletal towers clawing at the ash-choked sky. War had gutted it years ago, a brutal clash between the Galactic Concord and the rogue Cypher fleet. And though peace had technically been declared, the battlefield still breathed danger. Scavengers, rogue drones, and mutated beasts prowled the ruins, and only the desperate or the fearless dared to live there. Among them was Lyra, a tall, white-haired woman with skin the deep purple of twilight grapes, her eyes glowing faintly silver like twin moons in the dark. She was Xerian, a rare humanoid species from a dying moon orbiting a gas giant, and she had come to Varnies 7 not for glory, but grief. Her husband, Torin, had been a warrior of legend, a Xerian tactician whose strategies had turned the tide in 3 major offensives. But even legends fall. Torin had died in the final push against the Cypher Command Corps, sacrificing himself to detonate the reactor and end the war. Lyra had watched it happen through a cracked comms feed, his last words a soft, crackling, "Stay strong, my star." Since then, she had buried herself in the wreckage of Varnies 7, living in a half-collapsed command bunker wired with old defense systems and guarded by a pair of automated turrets she'd reprogrammed herself. She wore his old combat coat over her armor, the sleeves too long, the scent of him nearly gone but still clinging to the fabric like a ghost. She didn't speak much. She didn't need to. The silence was her companion, until he showed up. He arrived during a dust storm, a lanky figure trudging through the howling red winds, wrapped in a battered trench coat and dragging a plasma rifle like it owed him money. His name was Jax Wren, a human from Earth's outer colonies, a former infantryman with a crooked nose, messy brown hair that stuck out in all directions, and a grin that somehow survived every disaster he walked into. He wasn't a hero, not really. He was the guy who survived when heroes died, lucky, stubborn, and just skilled enough to keep breathing. He and Torin had fought side by side for years, sharing rations, sharing stories, and once, sharing a bottle of smuggled Xerian wine that made them both hallucinate floating jellyfish for 6 hours. When Jax heard Torin had fallen, he didn't send a message. He didn't attend the memorial. He packed his gear, stole a beat-up scout ship, and flew straight to Varnies 7. Not because he was noble, because he couldn't imagine Lyra sitting alone in that broken city, mourning a man they'd both loved in their own ways. He found her on the roof of the bunker, staring at the horizon where the twin suns were setting, painting the sky in blood and gold. She didn't turn when he climbed the rusted ladder, didn't flinch when he dropped his pack with a loud thud. "You're late," she said, voice soft but edged like a scalpel. "The funeral was 3 months ago." Jax shrugged, brushing dust off his coat. "Yeah, well, I got lost. Also, I think I was kidnapped by space pirates. Long story. They had terrible taste in music." Lyra finally turned, her silver eyes narrowing. "You're ridiculous. And you're still alive," he shot back, grinning. "So I guess we're both full of surprises." She didn't smile, but something in her expression softened. Just a little, like frost cracking under sunlight. Jax didn't ask to stay. He just did. He patched the bunker's failing power grid, fixed the water reclaimer that had been spitting brown sludge, and somehow managed to get the old comms array working again. He cooked meals that were either inedible or suspiciously delicious, depending on the day, and told stories about Torin that made Lyra laugh despite herself. Like the time Torin tried to meditate during a firefight and got hit in the head with a grenade launcher. "He didn't even flinch," Jax said, laughing. "Just opened one eye and said, 'I was in a deep state of inner peace.'" Lyra snorted. He was faking. He hated meditation. "Yeah," Jax admitted, "but he looked good doing it." They sat in silence after that, the weight of memory settling between them like a shared blanket. But Varnies 7 wasn't done with them. The peace was fragile, and scavenger warlords had begun carving up the ruins, using old war tech to build private armies. One night, a drone swarm attacked the bunker. 12 hunter kills, sleek and silent, sent by a warlord calling himself General Vex. Lyra reacted instantly, activating the turrets and diving into the combat net with fluid precision. But Jax surprised her. He didn't hide. He didn't panic. He grabbed his rifle, slapped a targeting visor over one eye, and started picking off drones with calm, methodical shots. One drone slipped through, slamming into the bunker's side and blasting open the east wall. Lyra lunged at it, slashing with her energy blade, but the drone's claws raked her arm, drawing dark purple blood. Without hesitation, Jax tackled her out of the way, took the blast meant for her on his armored shoulder, and emptied his entire magazine into the machine until it sparked and died. They spent the next few hours patching up, Lyra stitching her arm with steady hands, Jax cursing as he disinfected burns on his back. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "I did," he replied, wincing. "Torin would have kicked my ass if I let you get blown up by a toaster with legs." She looked at him then, really looked. His messy hair, the scar on his cheek from a plasma burn, the way his hands trembled slightly from adrenaline. He wasn't Torin. He wasn't even close. Torin had been calm, elegant, a warrior poet with a voice like deep water. Jax was loud, clumsy, and always seemed to have dirt on his boots. But he was here, and he wasn't leaving. Over the weeks that followed, they began to move as a team. Lyra handled tactics, stealth, and long-range precision. Jax brought brute force, improvisation, and an uncanny ability to talk his way out of or into trouble. They raided scavenger outposts, dismantled drone factories, and liberated prisoners held in underground pits. They fought back-to-back in collapsing tunnels, dodged energy blasts in zero-gravity ruins, and once escaped a collapsing reactor core by sliding down a molten pipeline on a stolen hover sled. Jax nearly fell halfway through, but Lyra grabbed his wrist just in time, hauling him up with surprising strength. "Remind me," he panted, "to stop suggesting insane escape plans." "Too late," she said, smirking. "You already did." They started calling themselves the Ghost Pact, a name whispered in fear across the battlefield zones. Some said they were vengeful spirits of the fallen. Others claimed they were a rogue AI in human and alien form. The truth was simpler. They were two broken people stitching themselves together with combat, survival, and something neither of them wanted to name yet. There were moments, small, quiet ones, that made Lyra pause, like when Jax learned to cook Xyrian food, burning 3 pots before getting the spice ratio right. Or when he fixed her broken locket, the one with Torin's image, and returned it without saying a word. Or the night she woke from a nightmare, screaming Torin's name, and found Jax sitting beside her bunk, holding a cup of tea and humming a human lullaby his mother used to sing. "You didn't have to stay," she whispered. "I know," he said, "but I'm bad at leaving people behind." She didn't cry, but she didn't send him away either. Their biggest challenge came from the Cypher Remnant, a faction of rogue soldiers still loyal to the defeated fleet. Led by a cybernetically enhanced commander known as Malvex, they launched a full-scale assault on Varnies 7, seeking an ancient weapon buried beneath the city. The Core Pulse, a device capable of disabling all electronics in a star system. If activated, it could plunge entire colonies into chaos. Lyra knew of the Core Pulse from Torin's final mission logs. He had tried to destroy it, but the reactor had been too unstable. Now Malvex wanted to claim it. The battle began at dawn. Waves of enemy troops poured into the ruins, supported by hovering gun platforms and armored walkers. Lyra and Jax fought from the shadows, picking off scouts, sabotaging supply lines, and planting EMP charges in key locations. Jax took a plasma bolt to the leg during a rooftop ambush but refused to retreat, crawling to a sniper perch and taking out 3 enemy officers with headshots. Lyra disabled a walker by hacking its control node and rerouting its power into self-destruct mode, blowing it to pieces just as it crushed a civilian shelter. They were exhausted, bleeding, but relentless. In the heart of the city, beneath a collapsed observatory, they found the entrance to the Core Pulse chamber. The door was sealed with a biometric lock keyed to high-ranking officers. Torin had been one. Lyra placed her hand on the scanner, and after a tense moment, the system recognized her as next of kin. The door hissed open. Inside, the Core Pulse glowed like a trapped star, pulsing with raw energy. Wires and conduits snaked across the walls, feeding into a central column that hummed with dangerous power. Malvex was already there, his body half machine, his voice a distorted growl. "You're too late," he said. "The pulse will fire in 10 minutes. The galaxy will fall to silence." Jax didn't hesitate. He charged, firing his rifle, dodging energy whips that cracked like lightning. Lyra engaged the defense grid, trying to override the activation sequence, but the system was locked. Malvex knocked Jax aside with a single mechanical arm, sending him crashing into a console. Blood trickled from his temple, but he got back up, grabbing a fallen shock baton. "You really don't know when to quit, do you?" Malvex sneered. "Nope," Jax said, grinning through broken lips. "Worst trait I got." Lyra found a backdoor in the system, a hidden protocol Torin had installed. It required a manual shutdown from the core chamber, a suicide mission. The radiation would kill anyone who entered. She didn't tell Jax. She moved toward the chamber door, her hand on the release. But Jax saw. He tackled her from behind, pinning her to the ground as the alarms wailed. "Don't you dare," he growled. "He died for this. I won't let you do the same." "There's no choice," she said, struggling. "There's always a choice," he snapped. "And mine is not losing you too." In that moment, something shifted. Not just in the mission, but between them. The way he looked at her. Fierce, terrified, refusing to let go. It wasn't just duty. It wasn't just loyalty. It was something deeper. Something neither of them had dared to name. Lyra stopped fighting. Instead, she reached up, touched his face, her fingers brushing the scar on his cheek. "Then we do it together," she whispered. They found another way, a risky bypass that would destabilize the core without requiring a sacrifice. Working in sync, Lyra hacked the primary systems while Jax jury-rigged a feedback loop using spare power cells and a salvaged drone brain. Sparks flew. Warnings blared. Malvex attacked again, but Jax held him off with the baton and a well-placed kick to the knee joint, shouting insults the whole time. "You know, for a guy who wants to rule the galaxy, you've got a really boring voice." Lyra, focused, fingers flying over the console, finally triggered the override. The core pulse shuddered, its light flickering, then collapsing inward with a silent implosion. The chamber went dark. Malvex screamed in rage as his systems failed, his cybernetics sparking and dying. Jax kicked him once for good measure, then collapsed beside Lyra, breathing hard. They didn't speak as they limped out of the ruins, the city quiet behind them. The sun was rising again, painting the broken towers in soft gold. Back at the bunker, they patched each other up in silence. Jax joked about needing a vacation. Lyra said maybe they could find a beach planet. He laughed. She smiled. And for the first time in a long time, the silence between them didn't feel heavy. Felt warm. Safe. Weeks passed. The Ghost Pact became legend. Bounty hunters, warlords, and even Concord officers whispered their name with respect. But in the bunker, life settled into a rhythm. Mornings started with Jax burning breakfast and Lyra pretending it was edible. Afternoons were spent training, repairing gear, or scouting for supplies. Evenings were for stories, sometimes sad, sometimes absurd, like the time Jax tried to dance in zero gravity and got stuck in the ceiling vents for 3 hours. Lyra still teased him about it. One night, as they sat on the roof watching meteor showers streak across the sky, Jax turned to her. "You ever think about leaving this place?" he asked. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But this city, it holds memories, not just of him, of us too." He nodded, kicking a small stone off the edge. "I used to think I didn't belong anywhere. Then I found this dump. And you." She looked at him, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight. "You're ridiculous," she said again, the same words she'd used when he first arrived. But this time there was a smile behind them. He didn't say anything else. He didn't need to. The way he sat close, the way his shoulder brushed hers, the quiet comfort of their presence. It said enough. They weren't just partners in battle anymore. They were something more. Not because they had planned it. Not because it was expected. But because, in the middle of ruin and war, they had found someone who understood the weight of loss, the value of laughter, and the courage it took to keep fighting. Not just enemies, but loneliness, grief, and the fear of moving on. They still fought. The galaxy was still dangerous. New threats emerged, rogue AIs, planetary rebellions, ancient weapons waking from sleep. But now, when they stood on the edge of battle, weapons in hand, armor scarred and worn, they didn't just fight to survive. They fought to protect what they had built, each other. And when the dust settled, they always came back to the bunker, to the cracked walls and flickering lights, to the smell of burnt food and the sound of Jax snoring through a cold. Lyra would sit by the window watching the stars, and sometimes, just sometimes, she'd feel a hand on her shoulder. She wouldn't turn. She'd just place her hand over his, and for a little while the universe would feel quiet. Not empty, not broken, but whole. Because even in the darkest zones of space, even among the wreckage of war and loss, love didn't arrive with fanfare. It crept in on tired feet, with a crooked smile, in the silence between heartbeats. It wasn't always loud. It wasn't always perfect. But when it came, it stayed. And it fought, just like they did. The peace after the core pulse collapse didn't last. In the vacuum of power left by Malvex's defeat, a new threat emerged. Not from warlords or rogue fleets, but from the stars themselves. Deep space sensors picked up an anomaly. A massive object drifting toward the Andromeda Reach, cloaked in gravitational distortions and emitting a frequency that scrambled neural implants. The Concorde called it the Hollow, a derelict vessel of unknown origin, larger than a moon, its surface pitted with structures that looked less like architecture and more like organic growths. Pulsed faintly, like a sleeping heart, and it was headed straight for Varney's 7. Lyra studied the data in the bunker's flickering holodisplay, her silver eyes narrowing. It's not Concorde, not Cipher, not anything in the Xerian archives. Jax leaned over her shoulder, squinting at the rotating image. Looks like a tumor with engines. She almost laughed. Possibly, but it's emitting a signal, a repeating pattern, not a distress call, a summons. He straightened, scratching his stubble. You think it's alive? I think, she said slowly, that it's waking up, and someone or something wanted it to. They weren't the only ones who noticed. Across the battlefield zones, scavenger clans began vanishing. Entire outposts went silent overnight. Then came the whispers. People seeing shadows that moved against the wind, hearing voices in their dreams, waking up with strange symbols carved into their skin. Jax found one such victim near the eastern ridge, a former soldier, eyes wide and unblinking, muttering in a language no translator could parse. The man reached for Jax, fingers trembling, and whispered one word before collapsing, Kethare. Lyra froze when she heard it. That's an old Xerian myth, she said, voice low. A being from beyond the stars that consumes memories, feeds on sorrow. They said it only came when a world was ready to die. Jax didn't believe in myths, but he believed in dead bodies, missing people, and the cold dread that had settled over Varney's 7 like a shroud. So what? This thing's a cosmic vampire? Worse, Lyra said. It doesn't just feed. It replaces. It takes your memories, your identity, and leaves behind a hollow version. Obedient, silent, waiting. He shuddered. Yeah, that's worse. They prepared. Not for war, not yet, but for infiltration. If the hollow was broadcasting a signal, it had a source, a control center, a brain. And if it was vulnerable anywhere, it would be there. They spent days modifying their gear. Lyra recalibrated her neural dampener to resist psychic interference, while Jax jury-rigged a pulse shield from Scavenge Tech, something to block the signal long enough for them to move inside. He also packed extra rations, a harmonica for moral support, and a small, dented flask of Xerian spiced tea, Lyra's favorite, which he'd finally learned to brew without burning. The journey to the Hollow was a nightmare. Their shuttle, a patched-together relic named the Rusty Sparrow, shuddered as it approached the colossal vessel. The air around it warped, gravity fluctuating in waves. Stars bent. Time stuttered. Jax gripped the controls, knuckles white, muttering curses under his breath. Lyra sat beside him, calm on the outside, but her fingers trembled slightly as she monitored the bio-readings. My pulse is spiking, she admitted. Not fear. The signal, it's already reaching us. Jax reached over and squeezed her hand. Then we don't give it anything to take. They landed on a jagged platform that resembled bone more than metal. The air was thick, humid, tasting faintly of copper. The walls pulsed faintly, veined with blue light. No guards, no drones, just silence and the feeling of being watched. They moved carefully, weapons ready, pulse shields humming. The deeper they went, the stranger it became. Hallways twisted in impossible angles. Gravity shifted without warning. Once, Jax stepped through a doorway and found himself back where he started, seconds before he'd left. Okay, he said, rubbing his temples. This place has a sense of humor. Bad one. Then came the visions. Lyra saw Torrens standing in a corridor, whole and unharmed, smiling at her. Come with me, he said. It doesn't have to hurt. She froze, breath-catching. Jax grabbed her arm. It's not him, he said firmly. Look at his eyes. She did. They were empty, black, soulless. With a shudder, she raised her weapon and fired. The image shattered like glass. Jax's turn came seconds later. He saw his younger sister, Mira, who had died in a colony collapse when he was 12. She stood in a doorway, holding a toy soldier, the same one he'd given her the day before the disaster. You left me, Jax, she whispered. You were supposed to protect me. His chest tightened. Tears stung his eyes. But he remembered Lyra's words. Don't give it anything to take. He clenched his jaw. You're not real, he growled. Mira was kind. You're just a shadow. He fired. The illusion vanished. They leaned against a pulsing wall, breathing hard. It's using our grief, Lyra said. Twisting it. Making us weak. Jax wiped his face. Yeah. Well, screw it. She looked at him, and for the first time, she saw not just the soldier, not just the friend, but the man who had stood beside her through fire and silence, who had laughed when he should have cried, who had stayed when every instinct told him to run. Her heart ached, but not with sorrow, with something warmer, something alive. They pressed on. At the core of the hollow they found it, the source, a vast chamber, circular, filled with floating pods, each containing a humanoid figure, eyes open, expressions blank. Wires connected them to a central column, a towering mass of shifting black matter that pulsed like a heart. In the center of the column hovered a being tall, translucent, its form shifting between shapes, but always returning to a familiar silhouette. A purple-skinned, white-haired woman. Lyra gasped. It was her. Or a version of her. It's using my image, she whispered. Why? Jax frowned. Maybe because you're the strongest memory it's taken. Or maybe it's trying to become you. The entity spoke not with sound, but directly into their minds. You resist, but sorrow is the sweetest fuel. You carry so much. Let go. Become hollow. Become one. Lyra stepped forward. You feed on pain, but you don't understand it. Pain isn't weakness. It's proof we loved. And love doesn't die. It fights. The entity recoiled slightly, as if burned. Jax grinned. And we're really good at fighting. They attacked. Lyra fired precision shots at the neural nodes feeding the central column, disrupting the signal flow. Jax charged the base of the structure, planting EMP charges they'd brought, blasting through layers of organic armor. The hollow fought back, sending waves of psychic force, summoning illusions, even animating the bodies in the pods, turning them into silent, relentless attackers. Lyra dueled a version of Tauren, her blade clashing with his energy staff, each strike a battle against memory. Jax fought a dozen copies of himself, cowardly, broken, defeated versions, each one whispering his failures. I'm not them, he roared, blasting them apart. I'm the one who stays. At the final moment, the entity tried one last trick. It formed into Lyra completely, perfect in every detail, and reached for Jax. I don't need you, it said in her voice. I never did. Jax hesitated. Then he smiled. No, she wouldn't say that. She'd say I'm an idiot for charging in without a plan. But she'd follow me anyway. He fired. The illusion screamed. Lyra triggered the final override, uploading a virus she'd coded from Tauren's old encryption keys. A paradox loop that forced the entity to consume its own signal. The core imploded. The chamber shook. The pods shattered. The hollow groaned like a dying beast, its structure collapsing inward. They ran. Back to the shuttle, through crumbling corridors, gravity failing, walls closing in. Jax carried Lyra when a blast threw her off her feet. She returned the favor when a chunk of debris pinned his leg. They reached the Rusty Sparrow just as the hollow began to spin, collapsing into a singularity. Jax fired the engines. They shot away as the vessel imploded behind them, vanishing into nothingness. Silence returned to the void. They floated in the cockpit, bruised, bleeding, but alive. Jax leaned back, laughing breathlessly. We did it. We actually did it. Lyra looked at him, her face streaked with grime and something wet he couldn't name. You were going to die for me? She said quietly. Back there. You would have stayed to blow the core. He shrugged. Yeah. So? Why? She asked, voice breaking. Because, he said, turning to her. You're not just my partner. You're not just Tauren's widow. You're Lyra. And I can't imagine a universe where I don't fight for you. She didn't answer with words. She reached for him, pulled him close, and kissed him. Deep, desperate, full of everything they'd survived, everything they'd lost, everything they were becoming. When they parted, her forehead rested against his. I didn't think I could love again, she whispered. But you're not him. You're you. And that's why it works. He smiled, tired but radiant. Took you long enough to admit it. They returned to Varney's 7 as heroes, though neither wanted the title. The Concord offered medals, resources, a new base. They declined. The bunker was theirs. The ruins were home. But things changed. Jax no longer slept in the spare room. His boots stayed by her door. Her combat coat hung beside his torn trench coat. They still fought. raiding warlords, protecting refugees, dismantling war machines. But now, after battle, they returned not just to shelter, but to warmth, to quiet dinners, to shared blankets on cold nights, to laughter in the dark. One evening, as they sat on the roof watching a double meteor shower paint the sky in silver and crimson, Jax pulled out a small, carved stone, a Xerian symbol for forever. "Found it in the ruins," he said casually. "Thought you might like it." Lyra turned it in her fingers, then slipped it into the pocket of her coat, right where Torrin's locket used to be. She didn't remove the locket. She added to it. Life wasn't about replacing. It was about carrying forward. And as the stars burned above them, two figures sat side by side. Alien and human, warrior and survivor, grief and hope entwined. The galaxy was still vast, still dangerous, still full of shadows. But they were no longer afraid of the dark, because now they walked into it, together. Years after the fall of the Hollow, when the stars had quieted and the battlefield zones of Varnies 7 were slowly being reclaimed by wind and wild vines, Lyra and Jax vanished from the stories. No more sightings, no more whispers of the Ghost Pact. The galaxy assumed they had died in some final, unseen battle, two legends swallowed by the void. But the truth was far simpler and far more beautiful. They left, not in a blaze of glory, not with a final stand, but in the quietest way possible. One morning, they packed a small shuttle, not the Rusty Sparrow, which had finally given out after one too many crashes, but a modest, solar-powered craft they'd rebuilt from spare parts. They left the bunker as they found it, scarred, stubborn, standing. Jax chalked a crude, smiley face on the wall with the words, "Back never." Lyra left a single white flower, a Xerian bloom that only grew in low gravity, pressed into the pages of Torrin's old journal, resting on the command chair. They flew far beyond the war-torn sectors, past the edge of Concord patrols and pirate routes, to a forgotten green world called Ellera 9. It was a planet untouched by industry, where oceans shimmered under twin suns, forests climbed misty mountains, and the air smelled of rain and blooming nightroot. No wars, no ruins, just life wild and peaceful. There, on a hill overlooking a silver lake, they built a home. Not a bunker, not a fortress, but a house with wide windows, a sloped roof, and a porch that creaked when you walked on it. Jax insisted on painting it blue. Because, he said, purple and blue go together. Like us. Lyra rolled her eyes but smiled as she hung wind chimes made from old bullet casings. They were married beneath a tree whose leaves glowed at dusk, their vows spoken in both Xerian and broken human tongue, witnessed by a curious deer, 3 adopted stray dogs, and a drone Jax had reprogrammed to play music. It only knew one song, which it played off-key. There were no grand titles, no military honors, just their hands clasped, their foreheads touching, and the quiet promise, "I choose you, every lifetime." And then, slowly, their life filled with noise. Not the roar of battle, but the sound of laughter. The first child came as a surprise. A little girl with Jax's messy brown hair and Lyra's glowing silver eyes, her skin a soft lilac hue. They named her Mira, after the sister Jax had lost. She was fearless, curious, and had a habit of climbing trees before she could walk properly. Then came Kale, a boy with Lyra's calm focus and Jax's knack for trouble. By age 4, he disassembled the family comms unit to see how it thinks. Twins followed, Nori and Teo, born during a thunderstorm, one quiet and thoughtful, the other loud and always singing off-key. And finally, little Sen, the baby, who giggled at shadows and somehow inherited Jax's ability to sleep through anything, even the time a meteorite landed in the backyard. Their home became a haven of chaos and warmth. Mornings began with Jax burning breakfast again, despite 30 years of practice, while Lyra calmly rescued the toast and served it with a smirk. The kids argued over who got to feed the sky lizards, fought over toys made from old war tech, and once tried to turn the lake into a laser shark habitat, using repurposed drone parts. Jax helped them every step of the way. Lyra rolled her eyes, but secretly recorded it all in a digital journal titled, "The Madness of Peace." Evenings were for stories, not of war, not at first. But as the children grew, they asked, "Did you really fight a monster made of memories? Did Grandpa Torrin really ride a plasma wolf into battle?" He didn't, but Jax insisted he did. Lyra would sit by the fire, her white hair streaked with silver now, and tell them the truth. Of loss, of courage, of two people who found each other in the wreckage. And Jax would add the jokes, the near-death escapes, the time he got stuck in a ventilation shaft for 8 hours because he was chasing a robot chicken. They didn't hide their past. They honored it. A wall in the house held relics. Torrin's old gauntlet, Jax's dented helmet, Lyra's energy blade, now decorative, and a framed photo of the Ghost Pact. Just the two of them, standing on a ruined tower, tired but unbroken. As the years passed, the children grew. Mira became a biologist, studying alien ecosystems. Kale joined a peacekeeping fleet not to fight but to rebuild. Nori became an artist, painting galaxies on canvas. Teo opened a music school for mixed-species harmony. His first student was a singing rock, and little Sen, he became a chef. And somehow, he was the only one who could cook without burning the house down. Jax and Lyra grew older, their steps slower, their battles now fought with canes and stubbornness. Jax's hair turned gray, his jokes a little slower, but his laugh just as loud. Lyra's skin lost some of its deep purple luster, her movements more deliberate, but her eyes still shone like twin moons. They walked together every evening along the lake, hands clasped, talking about nothing and everything. One night, under a sky thick with stars, Jax stopped and pointed. "Look," he said, "that cluster. It's shaped like a boot." Lyra leaned into him. "It looks like a squid." "No way. Clearly a boot. You see boots everywhere, because the universe is full of them." She laughed, the sound soft and warm, like wind through leaves. He turned to her, his face lined with time and joy. "Would you do it all again? Even knowing how hard it was?" She didn't hesitate. "Every second, every scar, every loss, because it brought me here, to you, to this." He kissed her gently, like he had 1,000 times before, and in that moment, as their children's laughter drifted from the house and the stars blinked above, they weren't just survivors. They weren't just warriors. They weren't just a Xerian woman and a human man from opposite ends of the galaxy. They were home, and their story didn't end. It simply became quiet, and that was the happiest ending of all.